thank you very much for having me. So this is more of a storytelling, actually, of the journey towards developing a payload. Uh, there will be some, maybe it might be some gaps, but I will be willing to entertain your questions later on. Okay, so what is this about? Um, So again, this is a story of payload development in the Philippines. So we'll start with, as Engineer Labrador mentioned earlier, um, we we started with Diwata. So we'll start with that. And then what is our inspiration of building the cameras locally? And then we'll touch a bit on the role of the industry here and some of the lessons that we learned along the way, and then so and some of the things that we can expect later on. Okay, so again, so this is the first Earth observation microsatellite of the Philippines. This is Diwata 1. This is what it looks like from the outside. If you look at it from the inside, you will see these parts here. And then I would like to highlight these two parts here. You have your HPT and your SMI. So the HPT is a high precision telescope. It's actually a 4-band telescope, so that about close to 5-meter resolution, but small SWAT. And your spaceborne multispectral imager with the liquid crystal tunable filter. So these are your payloads, and what they do is they enable Diwata 1 and Diwata 2 to perform their mission. Okay, so look again a bit of a backtrack what the payloads are. So payloads are actually those components of your satellite system or your spacecraft that enable you to perform the mission. Okay, and the payload would depend on the mission of the satellite, and sorry about that. I think my annotations are okay. So the payloads would vary from satellite to satellite or spacecraft to spacecraft depending on their mission. And the thing is, you have to craft them carefully so that you don't over design or under design your payload. So you have to look at their mission requirements, and of course the boss must be able to support the payload. So you have constraints that are both technical and logistical, and you have to look at dependencies as well. So for example, dependency on power. Okay, so here are the Diwata payloads. So I think Engineer Labrador earlier mentioned this. So you have your optoelectronic payloads. So I'll touch on that a little bit. And you have your data communication payload. Sorry, your communication payloads rather, particular an amateur radio on board Diwata 2. Okay, so now primarily Diwata is an optical Earth observation microsatellite, which means its payloads is essentially digital cameras. Okay, and they are optoelectronic, which means they work on this particular range of spectrum. And they're designed to capture spatial and spectral information about the Earth. Okay, so it's able to do its job, and you want to tune into particular wavelengths, because essentially when you take a picture of whatever you're taking, you're actually recording the interaction of light and matter. For example, if you're taking a picture of the soil, you're looking at the reflection of light on the soil. If you're looking at say aerosol, you're looking at scattering. If you're looking at foliage, let's say plants, you're looking at absorption of some of the wavelengths, reflection of some, and even increase in reflectance due to interference. And then you also look at water. If you're looking at water, let's say you're looking at absorption in the resonant frequency of your water molecules. And so what happens that when using a payload, what you do is you record the geophysical phenomena. Then later on the downstream, your data processors will process this data to derive what you call remote sensing data products. So for example, some here are on the top is turbidity in a lake, and here is maybe the NDVI, so which allows you to measure the health of the vegetation in the particular area. So how did it all started? So earlier, Engineer Labrador described how the satellite program started, and then our foray into payload development actually started from that one, but not yet in 2016. It started all the way back in 2014 when we were doing the planning for Duwata 1. And you see here a picture of those participants. And it's actually called the Square Science Plan. Uh, there's a lot of lectures there, and highlight there is the mission planning part. You identify the requirements, the main features of the payload, and discussion of the possible launch opportunities. Now, one thing I should note though is that when we came in there, we don't know anything about uh, satellite technologies or space technologies. We haven't developed anything to create into space. Uh, we do use space data by virtue of the Institute for Environmental Science and Meteorology and among others, but we have not developed anything made for space. We're just a bunch of engineers and scientists who are eager to develop something for space. Oh, by the way, before I move on, just want to note here in this picture are these two celebrities here. These are the Director General and Deputy Director General of PhilSA. And so what happens since we don't know anything, what we did is collaborate with those who already know, or already sent satellites into space, namely Hokkaido and Tohoku University in Japan. And so that's how Phil Microsat program came about. Um, we essentially it's a collaboration between the government, which provides the funds and monitors the project, and the academy, both locally and in Japan. So here are the interactions between these entities, and the ones who communicates with the stakeholders are the academy here in the Philippines. And then, as apart from the satellite, one of the outputs of uh, the Philippine Microsat program are the scholars. So in fact, there are two of them in this particular, or speakers right now. So Engineer Labrador and Dr. Salces are actually scholars of the Philippine Microsat program. Okay. Now, if you look at this particular figure, you can see here that some of the development parts have a counterpart locally in the Philippines. However, there's not a part here that is focuses on payload development. In fact, much of the activities are in the bus development and in data processing. And so when Stamina for Space took over, we realized that there are a lot of things that we cannot know because we don't know anything much about the payload. And so we made one of the changes we made when Stamina for Space came about is to focus on satellite payload development. Okay, so payload development became a focus of satellite development in the Philippines. So it enables us to do more with the payload if we know more about them. Okay, so here, so that's under Project Optical, and here are the objectives of Optical. So note here as a good mention of synergy is R2, which is collaboration between international, local, and international partners. In fact, Optical is a collaborative project, so it's between the UP Genetic Engineering and the National Institute of Physics, and then it's a partner internationally, which is Hokkaido University, and this is envisioned to spearhead the satellite payload development in the country, and then perhaps trigger a roadmap towards a payload development capable nation. So, and we realized it's a very long process, but we have to start somewhere. And that's how we did. Okay, so, and to be a good collaborator, we have the director general of PhilSA would always call this a T-shaped people, but essentially we have to be T-shaped. Essentially, you are a jack of many trades, but you are a master of one. So and then you bring that experts to the table, and you're able to communicate among different fields. Now, looking at the academic side, so locally, you have your National Institute of Physics, which is very good in optical science, and you have your UP Genetic Engineering Department, which is good in geoinformatics. And so the language between them is data processing. So there's a good synergy there. And then internationally, so you have your Hokkaido University, who is experienced in payload design and in testing. Uh, so that's how the interaction happened between NIP, G department, and Hokkaido University. So here are the activities. So we actually are developing two payloads, the primary and the secondary payload. The primary payload is actually the main payload, is designed for agriculture. Okay, and so the design will be happening in Japan, and fabrication and so as calibration, but it's in collaboration with the local presence here. It's particularly another project in Simon Force, which is HL50, and then opticals in particular. So there is a collaboration there, the design, and then Hokkaido takes care of the fabrication. There's constant communication, updates, how it is going. Do we have to change anything? So there's that communication there with the fabrication, and then when the fabrication is done, there's supposed to be a collaboration between Hokkaido and the local universities in terms of calibration. Sadly, the pandemic struck, and so we're only able to do it once, and the calibration of the main payload was performed only by Hokkaido University. Now, while that is happening, there is a development of a secondary payload, which is a small camera. And so the design and the fabrication will happen here, but the collaborator this time is a local industry. And we're also developing a satellite payload laboratory, which will allow us to calibrate and test the payloads that we have built locally. Okay, so while we were doing this, we realized that industry performs a very important role in the development, because fabricating the payload will take time, and if we are to do it alone in the university, it would delay the project hugely. And so we realized that we need to be able to communicate properly with the industry. It's a good thing also for the Philippines, because it will further enhance our satellite development capabilities. Okay, so international collaboration here is the activities. So in terms of design, it was acted by most universities. And then when it came to design review, and then the assembly integration was done in Japan, the testing qualification has to be done, supposed to be done by the UP and Hokkaido University. And so when in the design part, the technical specification actually came here from the Philippines. We did field works, we did computer simulations, we did the mission planning here in the Philippines. We communicated with possible end users before, and we send those technical specifications to Japan. We communicated with them through Hokkaido University before the fabrication of the payload. Okay, so again, another step back. So here are the components of optical payload, and must be able to build this locally. Okay, and so that's when it comes to the local activities, the activities is not between the university and the local company. So in terms of design and design review and fabrication, integration, as well as when it comes to testing, though, we collaborated with Hokkaido University. We were able to travel there when the restrictions eased out. So, okay, what is the role of the industry? So, in the academy, we can do the scientific missions, we can do research, and the theoretical knowledge. But the industry is very good at manufacturing, which is what we don't do in the university. And so we must be able to, what we can do is from the missions and from the specifications design that we build in the academy, we we sent it out to the university, to the industry, communicated with them in terms of the manufacturing, and we did this frequent monitoring and updating of the activities. And we also did some tests together. So there were times when our researchers went to the industry, to their companies to visit, uh, and to visit them, and we test them in their office. Sometimes the industry players, industry workers would also come to our laboratory and test the payloads with us. So so we did this activities together. Okay, now some challenges. There's no optical design company actually in the Philippines. So what we did is we are quite experienced in optical science. So but we have no optical engineering experience. So what we did is did have this online trainings, particularly from the SPIE, and then absorb the optical design part. So we learned along the way, and it's quite hard to actually tell the industry to do this because it would mean risk for them. Okay, so our development strategies that we chose some uh, space heritage, particularly the sensor of Diwata 2, the lens design we did in the academy, as well as the optomechanical design, but the manufacturing of the optomechanics was done by a local industry. And so, and the assembly also happened in the local industry. And so we have this particular payload. So this is spaceborne panchromatic camera. Actually, we're able to develop two. So we have here malikmata. In Filipino, malikmata means to glimpse or to glance. So difference that this the malikmata camera is actually a push-broom camera, whereas a panchromatic camera is a snapshot camera. Okay, some notes. Getting near to my end. Industry practices. So you have the fixed schedules. You have to take note of that. They must also have profit there, otherwise they won't engage you. And they have this documentation things that we do not usually do in the university, like scopes of work, among others. And so we needed to we also needed to adopt our procurement process because essentially the industry is not keen to waiting. So we have to have to put some certainty in the procurement process as well. So we needed to communicate we need to communicate our needs very clearly, and we have in the academy have to absorb some of the risk. Okay, so now moving forward. So Engineer Labrador mentioned this. There's also a part here with the payload development. So I am the payload engineer for MULA, and so we will be doing a 9-band multispectral imager. Same resolution, but wider swath than HPT. Okay, to summarize everything, so first, the payload development is a collaborative process. The development itself is composed of many engineers. For the Philippines, we first began with the payload being developed completely abroad. Then we have this collaboration with a foreign university, and then there's this development completely locally for small cameras. We are currently at the early phase with the next generations of satellites. We will be learning more, gaining more experience in payload development. And we realized that developing the Philippines' local space capability requires synergy with government, academia, and the industry. So just before I end, I would like to acknowledge DOST for the funding for Stamina for Space. So if you can contact us here, thank you very much.